Okay, now we're going to show you how to actually take data in the experiment. The first thing we want to do is we're going to want to practice a little bit. So when you want to do your pullback distances, you're going to want to make sure that you're consistently measuring your values. To do that, in my case, I want to choose to set the front of my car at the 0 mark on the ruler. And then when I pull back, I'm going to want to press down a little bit to make sure that the wheels are in contact with the surface. I'm going to pull back to the distance that I want, in this case 5 centimeters. And then I'm going to let go. And when I let go, I want to make sure the cart is moving as straight away from the box as possible and not at an angle. So I'm going to let go, and I can see that the car is moving at a pretty straight distance. So you want to practice that a couple of times to make sure that you have a good ability to do your runs. Now you may have to do this a couple of times, particularly when you're taking your data, to make sure that your data is looking kind of reasonable. All right, so now that I've practiced and I'm ready to actually take some data, I'm going to go into the particular card that we need in Pocket Lab, and I'm going to bring it up on the window here. And so as we can see in our Pocket Lab, we have a window here that says Connect to Pocket Lab. You're going to want to click on that if you haven't already. And eventually, the device should appear in the list of devices. It'll say PL Voyager. If it doesn't, your Pocket Lab may be off. You can just turn it on by holding this button, power button down for a second and letting it go. So I'm going to select this, and then I'll see the pair button lights up, and I'm going to click on pair. Now this may take a second, so don't panic if it's not connected right away. All right, so now we're connected. When Pocket Lab comes up, it's not going to necessarily connect to the right set of data acquisition that we want. In other words, what it's saying right now here is that it's trying to measure the acceleration of that little Pocket Lab. But if you recall, we're not interested in acceleration, we're actually interested in velocity. And so to get the right thing, I'm going to go up and I'm going to click on the graph button. And you can see that the acceleration slider is to the right. What I want is the rangefinder velocity, which is the one almost all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to click on that one until it slides to the right, and then I'm going to click on the acceleration to deselect that one. And when I'm done, I should have a single graph that's acquiring data. On the vertical axis, it'll say rangefinder velocity, and on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, it will be time. Now, right now, it's not actually recording anything. It's just running as a way to tell you what the sensor is. So now is a good time to practice one more time. You can watch this line. I'm going to hold the cart back. I'm going to push it back to the distance of interest. And then I'm going to let it go. And what I'm going to see is that this data jumps off of 0, which means that everything is working correctly and I can acquire data. So here's going to be the procedure for actually acquiring the data. We're going to hit this record button, but we want to make sure that we hit the record button at a good time and then hit it again to stop it. So I'm going to recommend, and again, it might take a little practice to do this, that I get my cart set up. I'm going to push back until I get to the distance that I want for the pullback distance. I'm then going to hit record, and once it stops recording, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to acquire my data, and when it kind of comes to rest, I'm going to hit the stop. Now don't hit anything else until you're ready to actually analyze your data. You're going to know you have a good set of data when you have a region that looks relatively flat, and you have to remember this is real experimental data, and so there's going to be a little bit of jumpiness in it, and so we're going to take some averages to make sure that we avoid too many problems with the data. You can see this sharp spike here is when I actually let the cart go. You can kind of see that there's a couple down here that are a little low. That's when it was speeding up. And then I hit a region where it kind of comes around before you can tell over here that it's clearly beginning to slow back down again. And so the region of interest that I want is really somewhere, say, around this data point over to this data point, that even though I have this big jump in here, that the beginning and end data points are roughly the same before I clearly see it slow down. I want to be careful about going too far out and getting data points where I'm clearly slowing down or where I'm clearly speeding up. So what you're going to then do is whatever you think is going to be your first data point, you're going to want to hold down. You're going to want to click there. You want to hold your left mouse button down. You're going to want to drag until you've covered the entire region of data that is of interest that you want to analyze. And when I get to my last data point, I'm then going to let go, and you're going to see this thing zoom in. Now, it's going to look really jumpy when you zoom in because the scales are so fine, and that's okay. So here's the region of analysis that I want to do. I'm then going to click on the lower left corner, and I'm going to select data analysis, and this little table will pop up. I can see that I'm taking analysis over a region of 0.7 seconds, which isn't too bad. I want to make sure that I have 4 or 5 data points at a minimum in here, and a few more is better. But if it's only 2 or 3, you're going to want to do another pullback and try to get a little bit better data. Again, so I want a region where it's relatively flat with 4 or 5 data points in that region at a minimum. You can see that my velocity jumps quite a bit, but I have a pretty good mean value of velocity, and this is the number that I'm particularly interested in. So my mean velocity for this particular pullback was 0.384 meters per second. So you're going to want to record that number in the table below. So I did a 5 centimeter pullback, and my first trial had 0.384, so I can enter that particular set of data. And then I can just click out of that box and it saves the data. Now we're going to want to do multiple runs. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close my data analysis box and I'm going to hit clear. And I'm going to wait a second until I see that line of data kind of come back showing me that it's ready to acquire more data. So now we're ready to go again. I'm going to take my car. I'm again going to pull back to the same distance that I want to let go. Now I'm ready to go and I'm going to hit record and then let go of the car. So record, and then I'm going to let go of the car, and I've acquired my data. Now you'll notice the scale looks funny here, and this is just an artifact of what Pocket Lab's going to do. But that's okay. My scale is really a little bit weird. It's kind of starting at 0.1 and going to 0.3. So what I want to do is double click on this left vertical axis. So this line right here, I'm going to want to double click on it, and that will auto scale my data and give me a better view of what we want to do. Now again, I'm going to want to select a region of fairly flat data. Notice in this region right here is where I was speeding up. That might be where I'm beginning to travel at my, I've reached my maximum speed. And so if I select a region again with 4 or 5 data points that are relatively flat before I begin to slow down, and I can select data analysis. And again, I got a value in this case of 0.397. We expect there to be some differences. Data, again, this is real data. And so we have our real data. So I'm going to enter that into my table. And then again, I'm going to do a third trial of this. And then when I'm done, I'm going to want to calculate the average speed from these 3 trials. And if you can't remember how to do the average, that's okay. The way we do the average is I'm going to add the speed of trial 1 to trial 2 to trial 3. So this first trial number plus the second trial number plus the third trial number, and then take the average, I divide that total by 3. And then I'm going to enter that value into my average speed. You're then going to do calculate the final kinetic energy as we've told you to by 1/2 mv squared, where you can get the mass of your cart from the sheet that's included with your box. You're then going to keep doing this. You're going to hit clear, you're going to acquire your data, and then when you acquire your data, remember you might have to click on that left axis to zoom back in again. And you're going to do it for a pullback distance of 10 centimeters and then a pullback distance of 15 centimeters. You're going to do 3 trials for each of those. You're going to calculate the average speeds and then calculate the kinetic energy. And then from that, you're going to calculate the force. One thing to note is that when you're done with your very last trial, you're going to want to save it. So when I do my last trial pullback, so again, the scale is way off, so I double click on the left axis so I can see the scale. And here's my region of velocity for that particular pullback. oops. If you ever zoom in by accident, you can always get back out by clicking on that. So I can zoom in here. But when you're done, you're going to want to make sure that you're looking at the full graph, and you're going to want to, on your very last run, hit save, not clear. So that will save the card for your professor to grade it. So that's how you acquire data and how you do this particular experiment. And if there's any questions, come back and watch the video again, and hopefully that will help you answer your questions.